This map of the Confederate South shows the Union Army's advance throughout the Civil War. By 1865, Federal forces had pushed deep into Virginia and the Carolinas, but Texas remained physically untouched by the Eastern front lines. Slaveholders across the region recognized this geographic blind spot. They retreated westward to escape the reach of the Union Army, forcing enslaved people to move with them. By the end of the war, the enslaved population in Texas had swelled to 250,000 people, hidden from the reach of federal law. Even after General Lee surrendered at Appomattox in April 1865, bondage in Texas persisted. Enslavers deliberately withheld the news of the Confederacy's collapse, maintaining their power through a total suppression of information. Because the state's geography had shielded these 250,000 people from the reach of the law, liberation required more than a mere decree. It required the physical presence of Union troops to finally break the silence. In mid-June 1865, Major General Gordon Granger landed on the shores of Galveston. He arrived with 2,000 federal troops to take command of the military district and dismantle the final remnants of Confederate authority. Many of those arriving troops were black men enlisted in the United States Colored Troops. Men who had recently escaped their own chains were now returning to Texas soil in blue uniforms, armed to enforce liberation. On June 19th, Granger issued General Order No. 3. The text declared that, in accordance with the United States Executive, all slaves were free. The order also dictated an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. Juneteenth marked the military dismantling of an isolated stronghold. It was the moment a hidden truth was finally brought into the light. The reaction from white Texans was immediate. As newly freed African Americans began organizing annual Jubilee gatherings, local municipalities systematically banned them from using public parks and civic spaces. In 1872, 4 formerly enslaved community leaders in Houston, Jack Yates, Richard Allen, Richard Brock, and Elias Dibble, decided they would not let their freedom be silenced by spatial restrictions. They coordinated a fundraising effort across local churches. By pooling contributions from their congregations, they raised $800 to purchase a 10-acre plot of land in Houston's 3rd Ward. By combining resources, they secured the ground beneath their feet. This transaction converted the legal promise of equality into undeniable physical ownership of American soil. They named it Emancipation Park. For decades, it stood as the first public park in Texas dedicated exclusively to the African American community, providing a permanent home for Juneteenth celebrations. The grounds also functioned as a center for self-education. Families gathered on the grass to read and preserve history, making literacy a central pillar of their annual gatherings. The creation of Emancipation Park demonstrates how these communities built their own physical infrastructure to turn legal rights into a lived reality. 64 years later, Texas prepared to celebrate its 100th anniversary of independence from Mexico with the massive 1936 Texas Centennial Exposition in Dallas. Local fair organizers initially planned to exclude African American achievements from the celebration. Dallas civic leaders, led by Antonio Maceo Smith, bypassed the local resistance. They took their case to Washington and secured a $100,000 federal grant to fund their own exhibit. Dedicated on Juneteenth, 1936, the resulting Hall of Negro Life became the first federally funded exhibition space dedicated to Black culture in United States history. Inside, visitors were surrounded by murals painted by artist Aaron Douglas. The exhibits displayed evidence of progress in health, agriculture, and fine arts, presenting the depth of Black brilliance to a largely integrated audience. Despite its success, the fairgrounds dismantled the Hall of Negro Life just 1 year later, erasing its physical footprint from the park. But the psychological impact survived. The organizing power and communal pride generated by the exhibit helped spark the modern civil rights movement in the region. As Black Texans participated in the Great Migration, they carried Juneteenth with them across the country. What began in Galveston and matured in local sanctuaries ultimately gained recognition as a federal holiday in 2021. Juneteenth represents the legacy of African Americans claiming space, building sanctuaries, and establishing the physical architecture of their own liberation.